Joining me right now is South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, the Senate Judiciary Chairman, who has promised a deep dive on FISA abuse. The senator also sits on the Appropriations, Foreign Relations, and Budget Committees. And, Senator, it is good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Happy 5th anniversary.
Thank you so much, Senator. Look, this is good news on the 5th anniversary here because we know that we have been seeking the truth for the last year and a half. Kudos to you and your colleagues for bringing that information to us over the last year and a half. What are you going to do in terms of next steps?
Well, there are three things I'm going to look at as Judiciary Chairman. The Clinton email investigation. Why did Comey take over the investigation? I'd like to talk to Lynch and Comey. I'd like to find out whether or not they basically were in the tank for Clinton and gave her a pass. When it comes to the counterintelligence investigation, I want to find out why they never went to Trump to tell him he may have a problem with people in his campaign working with the Russians. You know, they told Feinstein she had somebody in her office working with the Chinese. Why didn't they do that with Trump? And the last thing is the FISA warrant. How could this document, the dossier, be used to get a warrant against an American citizen 4 times and is still unverified to this day?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because we have covered the fact that there were 2 investigations going on at the same time, the so-called Trump collusion and the Hillary Clinton investigation into her emails. But based on the Lisa Page testimony that was released a couple of weeks ago by Doug Collins over in the House, she said that they got word at the FBI that the DOJ was not going to press charges. So even before an interview with Hillary Clinton, even before the exoneration letter that Jim Comey wrote, they were told, don't even go there in terms of gross negligence, right?
Yeah, so it seems to me that she was interviewed not under oath. She had a couple of her staff people with her. People in her campaign were given immunity without anything in return. Nobody in the Clinton email investigation went to jail for lying about the process because there was no process. And I know Bill Barr pretty well, and he's pretty upset about the way all this was handled. And I don't know if he's going to have a special prosecutor to look at the probability of criminal misbehavior. I'm going to look at what happened from an oversight role, but I hope there's a special counsel appointed to look at DOJ corruption and political bias, you know, because Mueller did his job against Trump. Nobody's really looked at the Clinton campaign, the FISA warrant abuse, or the counterintelligence investigation for criminality yet, and somebody should.
So could an investigation into Hillary Clinton be reopened at this point then?
I'm not so much worried about retrying her, but I want to make sure that the public understands that she got away with something they wouldn't get away with. Right. I think it's important to understand that political bias probably drove the Clinton outcome, not the facts. I really don't believe that Comey just took over the investigation from Lynch based on a tarmac meeting. I just want the American public to know that the standard used against Clinton is an outlier. It's not the way business is done. And why did they choose that path? I think they had a political bias. They wanted Clinton to win, Trump to lose. And here's the point. How could she win if the Department of Justice indicted her? I think that's what drove the decision not to indict. They wanted her to win.
Well, I mean, you would think that William Barr, as the new Attorney General, wants America to trust that the FBI and the DOJ are not getting politics involved in their investigations, that it's actually based on the rule of law. Do you think as a result of that, he will seek this truth?
Yeah, I know he will seek this truth. And my job is to find out how the system got off track, to provide oversight. Do we need to rewrite the FISA laws to make sure this never happens again? Do we need to have congressional rules about counterintelligence investigations of presidential campaigns? But somebody needs to look at the behavior and see if they violated the law. Like Mueller looked at the Trump campaign extensively. Nobody has taken a look at the other side. And I hope Bill Barr will either appoint a special counsel to do that or do it himself, because it's important that both campaigns be looked at, not just one.
I mean, you've already delivered a ton of testimony and evidence for the Attorney General to look at. You have also told us in the last several weeks that you're going to be asking the people who signed the warrant to spy on Carter Page to testify. When are you going to be announcing that?
Well, May 1st, Barr is going to bring the Mueller report over. And to all these people who believe that somehow the summary given by Attorney General Barr is inaccurate, that's ridiculous. Do you think Bill Barr would risk his entire life's reputation by putting out a summary of a 400-page report that didn't get it right? The conclusions are there was no collusion, there was no obstruction, and we'll see the whole report redacted for classified information and grand jury testimony May the 1st. And after that, I'm going to turn toward looking at the counterintelligence investigation, how the Clinton email investigation was handled, and FISA abuse.
So what about the full report? Do you think he should release the full report? Because the last time I checked, our judicial system wasn't such that we say, oh, we've investigated you for 2 years and we're deciding no charges. But by the way, what you did here looked really shady, and what you did there got us stuck on a couple of things. I mean, it's either indictment or no indictment, charges or no charges. But what do you think about releasing the full report?
Well, Comey violated that principle by saying, we didn't find evidence of she was extremely careless but not criminally liable for the Clinton email debacle. So what I want to do, this has been 2 years, $25 million. I want to protect grand jury testimony, protect classified information, but I want the public to see the underlying document. This has been a cloud over President Trump for 2 years. That cloud has been removed, and I want people to see why Barr concluded what he did and why Mueller concluded what he did.
Senator, you were actually with the president a week ago when the report had just been released to the Congress, the summary from the AG. What was the president's mood? Were you guys talking about it?
Well, he was very pleased that everything he'd been saying for 2 years proved to be right. If you know President Trump, and I've got to know him pretty well, there is no way he sat down with the Russians and came up with a plan and followed it. He doesn't come up with he doesn't collude with his own government. So this whole thing was ridiculous if you know the president, and it's proven to be ridiculous. And I told him about 1,000 times, there's one person that can clear you of this, and it's Mueller. And I want people to understand that Mr. Mueller for 2 years looked at this very hard. He came out with the conclusion there was no collusion. And Jim Clyburn said, as a Democrat, we need to move on. Adam Schiff represents a wing of the Democratic Party, the Oliver Stone wing of the Democratic Party, that will never let this go because they can't accept Trump being president. This whole investigation has been pushed by people who believes that the election really never happened when it did. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to wrap up here on this, you're not expecting jail time. You're not expecting criminality to come out in terms of accountability. I know Devin Nunes is coming out with his criminal referrals this week. Where will the accountability be then?
Well, you need a special. I'm not a prosecutor. And Horowitz is not a prosecutor. So what I want is a prosecutor to look at the Clinton email investigation to find out if there was criminal wrongdoing in the way it was handled. I want a prosecutor to look at whether or not they misused the counterintelligence tools inappropriately. Did they break the law when they spied on Trump's campaign? I want a prosecutor to look at whether or not those who signed the affidavit certifying that the dossier was reliable to the FISA court, did they misrepresent to the court? Did they commit a crime? I want a prosecutor to look at this, not a politician.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, let me switch gears, ask you about this really threatening drastic action against Mexico. The president declared he is likely to shut down the border, the southern border, next week, unless Mexican authorities immediately halt all illegal immigration. We've got two caravans coming to the country right now. Your reaction to the president's threat?
Well, I mean, what are we supposed to do? You have the Mexican government allowing thousands of people to walk all across Mexico. They provide them buses. They drop them off at the border, and they say, here, United States, deal with this problem. We've had 100,000 people cross the border illegally in March alone. We're on track to over 1 million this year if this keeps up. So Mexico could help more. They should help more. The Triangle countries, 70% of the people coming here illegally come from 3 countries. Yeah. We need those countries to help more. So if the president feels like that the only way to control this problem is to move the people from the port of entry to the ungoverned spaces where we need a wall, I will support him. I hope we don't have to do that. To my Democratic friends, let's sit down and change these laws that entice people to come here legally.
He's just kicked off his 2020 re-election campaign with a little help from the vice president, Mike Pence. Congratulations on that, Senator.
Thanks. Thank you, Mike and Karen, for coming down and making a hell of a case for me to get reelected. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sold. I'm ready to vote for me. Let's do it.
Well, you got a lot of fans out there. Now, I know that health care is obviously one of the most important issues in terms of your reelection, in terms of the president's reelection. And the president this week said that the Republican Party is going to become the party of health care. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, because you got to have a plan. Do you think the Republicans have a plan?
Yeah, I think we got a lot of good ideas. I'm going to run on health care. I'm going to challenge my Democratic colleague, any Republicans, libertarians, vegetarians, to replace Obamacare. We started out with 5 plans in South Carolina. We're down to 1. Premiums went up 31% last year. Obamacare has failed in South Carolina. It needs to be replaced with plans that require the pre-existing conditions to be covered, but more flexibility, more choices. So I'm going to run on health care. My idea is to take the money in Washington, send it back to South Carolina, cover sick people, but let my state come up with a plan that fits South Carolina and get out from this Obamacare umbrella in Washington that's crushing us. The Supreme Court, I believe, will strike Obamacare down. The only reason Roberts voted to uphold Obamacare is because the individual mandate was considered to be a tax, and the government can tax almost anything. Now the individual mandate has been struck out of the law. I think it falls. So here's my plan: to take the money in Washington, block grant it back to the states, give the people of South Carolina control of this money, not some bureaucrat in Washington, and we'll do a better job than anybody in Washington could ever hope to do for South Carolina. That is my plan.
And we'll be following that. And, of course, national security has been also a major theme for you. You've been a stalwart in terms of being strong for the military, not just our troops around the world, but also when it comes to cyber. China is an issue. That's something else that you've been dealing with a lot. We got some new data overnight. The China manufacturing gauge, the purchasing managers, hit a 6-month high. It was actually a positive for the Chinese economy. But the economy there has weakened because of trade. What are your expectations in terms of a deal between the U.S. and China? And how much should we focus on things like Huawei and the risks to the U.S. national security as a result of all the espionage going on, Senator?
Because of President Trump, this is the best chance we've had to stop China from cheating in my lifetime. China steals our intellectual property. If you do business in China, they're required to have a Chinese business partner. They steal everything you own. They have state-run enterprises that no business in South Carolina can compete with the government of China. So Trump has decided to take China on. Their economy has been crippled because of these tariffs. We will get a great deal, or we will have no deal at all. Somebody needs to bring China to heel. Somebody needs to make them play fair, and I'm standing behind President Trump. When it comes to China, you've got to experience some pain to make them stop cheating us. So in terms of the 5G movement here, Huawei, to our European friends, if you go into a Chinese 5G network, you're going to have a hard time doing business with the American economy and the American national security infrastructure, because it will become a spy platform. So President Trump's done 2 things. He's put the world on notice. Watch when you buy Chinese technology. We can't do business with you if you go Chinese 5G. And he's also told the Chinese, your days of cheating are over. Yeah, and we need to stand behind our president, and I will.
Mike Pompeo came on the show and talked about how he's trying to make the case to Europe because they're pushing back because the Huawei infrastructure was cheaper. What about North Korea? What's your take on where that goes next? Why did the president leave early, that meeting with Kim Jong-un?
Because he felt like Kim Jong-un wasn't serious about getting a deal. You got to be willing to walk if you ever want to get a good outcome. Nobody's had North Korea in the spot we have today because President Trump got North Korea's attention because he pushed back hard. He told them in no uncertain terms, you're going to give up your nuclear weapons and your missiles that can hit America, but I'm willing to give you a great deal in return. We're talking to North Korea from a position of strength. He walked away, and I would suggest to the North Koreans, to the Chinese, and to the Japanese and South Koreans that you help President Trump find a way to end this. Make sure that North Korea gives up their nuclear weapons, their missile technology that can threaten an American homeland. In return, provide security and prosperity in North Korea. Everybody before Trump talked a lot and did nothing. For the first time, we finally got North Korea's attention, and China needs to help us.
All of these issues are front and center for you in your re-election campaign. What are your priorities beyond that? it feels like you're up against the Democrat platform that in many ways is looking more and more socialist, whether it's Medicare for all, Green New Deal, big federal programs that are running people's lives.
Medicare for all means Medicare for nobody. Can you imagine finally getting on Medicare after waiting all these years, and Bernie Sanders invites 80 million of his closest friends to join you? You know, that will collapse Medicare as we know it. It will be inferior health care. My goal is to run on the idea that we should take the Obamacare dollars, block grant them back to the states, make sure that sick people are covered, and allow states to figure this out, have innovation at the state level, because nobody's ever going to figure anything out in Washington. When it comes to the tax code, keep taxes down. Do not destroy the economy by trying to help the environment. The Green New Deal will never protect the environment because it destroys the economy. That will be the end of the American economy. My goal is to put as many conservative judges on the court as possible. President Trump's greatest legacy will be reshaping the court. My goal is to stand behind the president to rebuild the military, stand up to China, put Iran in a box, destroy ISIS, and stand by our friends like Israel. I've got a very specific agenda, and it includes health care.
All right. It's a tall order, Senator. We'll be watching. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Senator Lindsey Graham.